everyone, today I'll be showing you guys how I achieved this gorgeous soft glam on my beautiful client. Soft glam is one of my most popular services, and I believe because it's just a timeless look. It's universal, it's perfect for any occasion, so let's get into it. So before anything, I always cleanse my client's face with some micellar water just to remove any lingering oils or residue. And then I go straight in with the Embroylisse moisturizing cream. You can find this in my Amazon storefront. And this moisturizer is one of those things where if it's not broken, I'm not going to fix it. So that has been my go-to moisturizer for years now. And for her T-zone area, I went in with the One Size Secure the Oil Primer. This is by far my most favorite mattifying primer. And for foundation, I did mix NARS Soft Matte Foundation in the shade Tahoe and Macao. It's rare I ever just use one foundation shade on my clients. I love to mix foundations. I feel like this makes it more custom. And to blend that out, I'm using a flat, dense foundation brush. And I really like to spread out my foundation evenly. That way, I'm just buffing the foundation into the skin and not using so much of a sweeping motion. And for cream bronzer, I'm using a concealer shade that is unfortunately discontinued. But again, to blend, I'm tapping rather than sweeping because I don't want to disrupt the foundation layer that is underneath it. And you'll see me go back and forth with my foundation brush with no additional product, just a brush to buff out the edges. And then I go in with this Real Techniques highlighting brush, and despite the name, I never use it for highlighter, but instead I use it for cream products like blush and concealer. As for blush placement, I started off on the apples of her cheeks and I went up all the way almost near her temple. I really love the lifted look that you could achieve with blush, and again, blending out the edges with my foundation brush. The key to a flawless base is going to be patience because you're going to be doing a lot of back and forth blending to achieve that smooth look. We hate harsh lines over here, so don't be afraid to go back in with your foundation brush. And for concealer, I'm going in with the NYX Serum Concealer in the shade Medium. And if you could tell, when I'm placing that concealer down, I'm kind of already blending it out with that flat concealer brush. That way, when I go to blend it out, I'm simply tapping over this. So be mindful about how you're placing your products on your face, because if you're just drawing lines on your face, it's going to be much harder to blend later, especially if that concealer dries down like that, and we don't like harsh lines. And with the opposite side of that Real Techniques brush, I'm simply tapping over where I placed that concealer, and look how easily that blends out. And that's simply because of how I initially applied that concealer. So if you usually draw lines on your face, give this a try. Even if you don't use as much concealer, give it a try and watch how much easier blending is for you. And I placed this concealer in areas that I wanted to highlight, which was her under eyes, her chin, above her lip, and down the bridge of her nose. I really do enjoy the formula of this NYX Serum Concealer. I keep multiple shades in my kit. I'm actually going in with the same concealer in the shade Beige right under her eyes to highlight her face a bit more. I think using two concealer shades really gives your foundation base some dimension. And it was her birthday, so we were going for that more glam look. And again, to blend that out, I'm simply tapping over where I placed it. I'm not dragging it any lower or any higher. I'm keeping it right where I placed it. And to pick up any excess product, I do go in with a damp beauty blender. And before I set her under eyes, I'm just reinforcing that blush with the same brush, no additional product, because it can get kind of lost in the midst of us blending out that concealer. And before I go in with powders, I just give the face an overall good blend, because once it's set, that's how it's staying. So I always tell my students, if you don't like how your base looks wet, you're definitely not going to like it with powder. So make sure you are completely satisfied with the blend of your makeup before you go in with that powder. And to set the concealer, I'm using a powder puff in the shade Brightening Peach by Morphe. And I appreciate a peach powder rather than yellow on medium complexions. Olive skin tone specifically, I feel like it's brightening, but it's still neutral. And to set her foundation, I'm going in with a big fluffy brush and Sephora's Micro Smooth powder in the shade Golden. This is one of my favorite pressed powders. It's not chalky and it's not too heavy. It really is true to the name Micro Smooth. And for bronzer, I'm going in with MAC's Give Me Sun on an e.l.f. contouring brush. Believe it or not, a lot of my brushes are from e.l.f. I really do enjoy the shape and quality of their brushes. And I'm tapping that bronzer everywhere that we place that cream bronzer. And for powdered blush, I'm going in with MAC Mineralize blush in the shade Dainty. I love that this blush has some sparkle to it, so it kind of gives my clients that glow from within without being too overbearing like a traditional highlighter would be. But this formula is quite sheer, so it does take some building, which I don't mind. But I did want a bit more pigment, so I went in with the Juvias Place Volume 2 blush palette, and I reached for the hottest pink, but I'm focusing this shade near her temple on her upper cheek area. This helps me add more dimension to the face as well as add to that lifted effect that I like to play into. And to balance out the face, I went in with MAC's Give Me Sun on a small smudge brush along the sides of her nose bridge, and this was like a rough nose contour. It wasn't too precise, but mainly for cohesiveness. And then I went straight into the eyes. Sometimes I do eyes first. It really depends on the look and my mood. But using that flat concealer brush, I just went in and cleaned up her brows, really using the shape of this brush to help me get a precise line. And this is the same concealer I used under her eyes, NYX in the shade Medium. And this concealer will act as our eyeshadow primer. You always want a nice smooth base to apply those eyeshadows on. I don't think I've ever just used an eyeshadow primer. I always just use concealer. That's just what works for me. And it's controversial, but I do like to set my eyeshadow primer. Not the lids, because I'm going to use the eyeshadow for that, but for the crease and brow bone, I do like to set it. And the reason being, I do use sweeping motions on the eyes. So if I don't do this part, then it kind of just sweeps the concealer away. So I do like to set those areas. And the first shade I'm going in with on a fluffy blending brush is the same bronzer that we use, which is the MAC Give Me Sun. You should think of your transition shade as a background color for the other shades that you want to add on top. And I like to apply this shade directly above the crease and on the outer corner, and above the crease, that way you could see it whenever she opens her eyes. Now with this second shade on an even smaller blending brush, I'll focus this shade more on her outer corner as well as about 2/3 of her crease. So not all the way into her inner corner, but only about halfway. And a good rule of thumb is the smaller the brush, the darker the shadow. That way you could still see all the beautiful layering in your eyeshadow. A lot of times if you feel like your eyeshadow look just looks like one color, it may be because you're using brushes that are the same size. And to make sure the edges are blended seamlessly, I'll go back in with that fluffy blending brush, not with additional product, but just a brush to blend out those edges. And on an even smaller brush and with a darker shadow, I'm focusing this shade directly on her outer corner and even dragging it on her lash line a little bit. And the darker we go, the more dimension we add to the eyes. So you could always stop at the transition shade, but for more drama, go in with darker shadows on smaller brushes. And always go back in with your previous brush that you use just to make sure that the edges are blended together seamlessly. It may seem like a lot of steps because it is, I'm not gonna lie, but do you want to be blended or not? And I left the lid area blank because I did want to go in with a highlighting shade just to bring the eyes forward a bit. I'm using a matte nude shade for this, not white, but more so nude. And I really stamped that color on to set the concealer that we didn't set. And again, going back in with that fluffy blending brush just to make sure the edges are blended together. And with that same lid shade, I'm using that to highlight her brow bone. And then on an e.l.f. smudge brush, I'm using a dark brown and black shade to line her lash line. This step really adds volume in addition to her lash extensions. But I'm really using the shape of this brush just to stamp that color along the lash line. And to me, this step just makes a big difference. And I love to do this step on my clients with round or almond eyes. Not so much with hooded eyes because the brown can transfer onto the lid. But with that small blending brush that I use, I'm going to blend out the edges of that eyeshadow that we just stamped. I like the smoky effect that adds. And then I go in and highlight her inner corner. I used a white shade mixed with that nude shade. And I use a small pointed brush for this step. Now we cannot have a full eyeshadow look going on our lids and have our under eyes completely blank, so I mixed a bit of that transition shade along with the medium brown and ran this along her lower lash line. This is a step you don't want to miss. It really just brings the whole look together. And to really set it off, you could add your eyeliner of choice. I know my client appreciates a white or nude rather than something dark, but I believe with this eyeshadow look, you could really pull off any eyeliner shade, whether it be black or even a pop of color. And for the final touches, I lightly filled in her brows because she already has beautiful brows. And then I went in with Bobbi Brown Peach Glow highlighter on the apples of her cheeks, the tip of her nose, and down her nose bridge. The first spray I went in with was Max Fix Plus, just to melt down all those powders we use, and I'll really press that spray in with the damp beauty blender. Now note that I did say this was a fixing spray. This is not a setting spray by any means. This is not going to help with the longevity of your makeup, but it'll help your makeup look more skin-like. Now the setting spray I'm going in with is really good for setting. This is by One Size On Till Dawn setting spray, and it is a dry spray, so it's not going to feel damp like the first spray did, and that's really going to help with longevity and overall wear time of your makeup. And then I added some bottom mascara. This step I love. I feel like it just gives you doll eyes, but if you're not into that, then I guess you could skip it. And for the lip combo, I went in with a neutral brown to line her lips, and I kind of did overline, but as you can see, I always bring it back down to her natural lip line. So I don't overline the entire lip, but mainly the cupid's bow, and then I bring it back down to her natural lip line. And for the center of her lips, I used Ruby Kisses lipstick in the shade 2, and on top I went in with NYX Fortune Cookie lip gloss. You could find both the lipstick and the lip gloss at your local beauty supply, I'm sure. The lip liner is Beauty Creations, and I know not all beauty supplies have that, but Ruby Kisses also has a great lip liner line. And that is how we achieve this beautiful matte smoky soft glam. Let me know if you ladies enjoyed this tutorial. I enjoyed creating it for you all. Thank you to my gorgeous client and model. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe for more makeup content. And if you're in the Houston area, you can book an appointment at www.makeupbytati.org.